morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian M. Hauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, YouTube, all those places at Hawk Blogger. And we are on what is day 3 of the kind of legal tampering period of free agency. But technically, day 1 of free agency, as the league year will officially open 1 p.m. today, Pacific time, and all the trades that we've already been knowing about for days or a week or more will become official today. All the signings that we've been hearing about will become official today. All the cuts, all of the people being released, all that will happen today. So there will be news, but it will be mostly recycled news, things that we have already heard, as well as, a few things here and there as we get more signings and new maneuvers happening. So definitely more to come today. As far as this show, I've got actually a lot to cover, and it's kind of all over the place. I will talk to you about where the Seahawks stand in terms of what they're looking for and what's available to them. And we'll talk about some possibilities that maybe they'll consider that maybe we wouldn't have thought of before. We'll talk about a report from Brady Henderson that I think we'll probably start the show with, and I'll discuss the implications of it. We will talk about the draft situation because that has changed, and I think pretty significantly that has changed. So, I might have changed my mind. I might lead with that because I think it's a pretty quick one. We'll talk through it and we'll talk about the implications. I also want to touch on what has become a rampant rumor spreading around Twitter about the involvement of Seahawks ownership in either blocking or not blocking moves. I've got some thoughts I want to share on that, and we'll get to that as well. If I forget any of those things, feel free to remind me. Well, we have some other things to cover as well, some moves that have been made. We'll talk through all that. So, a lot to get to. This is not going to be the 6 or 7 or 8 hour marathons that I've been doing the first 2 days of free agency. I don't think there's enough to talk about for that to be worth any of our time. But if things break and it's meaningful enough, I certainly will come back later for an emergency pod as usual. We are going to be doing Real Hawk Talk tonight, so it's at least a double pod Wednesday, as Dana O'Gorman will be joining me, and we'll see if one of the other co-hosts will be there as well. So we will talk and catch up on what's been going on, feelings, thoughts, take questions from patrons, all that stuff tonight. That will be, I think, at 6 p.m. Pacific time, but I'll get back to you with the specifics as soon as I have them. All right, so let's catch up on some of the smaller moves, what's been going on. Just as this morning, Trey Brown formerly of the Seahawks, cornerback Trey Brown, he as a free agent off of his rookie deal, and according to Instagram and a couple other places, he is signed with the 49ers. So never happy to see a Seahawk go that direction, but I will tell you, Trey Brown is one of my favorite players on the Seahawks, not just as a player, but as a person. And I'd say primarily as a person, not because he's a lesser player, but he's a great guy, smart guy, hard worker, and as battled some injuries. And I hope that the 49ers are awful, and I hope Trey Brown plays really well. So really good luck to him. Guy that's been kind to me, come on the show before the show had any real momentum. And, I learned from him, and, he had some really, really excellent moments for the Seahawks. Unfortunately, most of them came, a couple years ago, and unfortunately, he's just battled a lot of injuries. But a guy that I really like, and had I think a pretty tough year last year on the field, and I'm glad that he's going to get an opportunity to kind of erase that and show something new. All right, so Trey Brown to the 49ers. Other moves, just catching up on some minor things. Joey Bosa had been seeming like a fait accompli to go to the San Francisco 49ers to team up with his brother, Nick Bosa. Their moms seemed to want it to happen, but he signs a 1-year, $12.6 million deal to go to the Buffalo Bills. And so the 49ers were in on this, but reports are saying they would not budge past $8 million a year. If you're looking at everything going on with the 49ers, they have just bled out in terms of they didn't retain anybody really, and they didn't really add anybody. It is looking rough for a team that finished with 6 wins last year. They obviously still have some really good talent, but I think the reports from Grant Cohen from a year ago that were largely panned and criticized by 49ers fans, that ownership was not thrilled with the spending and not thrilled with the deal to Brandon Ayuk, that might be true. They might have some restrictions there. The other thing that I'm seeing is a general report that the 49ers, as a matter of philosophy, generally don't want to sign players to third contracts. So, they're looking to move beyond third contracts and draft and develop. I think that that's worth paying attention to, and I actually think there's truth to that, because a lot of teams look at these third contracts that are always very expensive for players that have been in the league for a while and had a lot of production, and they don't often get the return on the investment for those. Injuries pile up, production declines, and keep in mind, John Lynch, John Schneider are very close. They're good friends. And I think that John Schneider has some of the same point of view. I think you can look at the DK Metcalf trade as an example of that kind of move. But the 49ers look to be depleted. They have a pretty good set of draft picks. I think they have 4 picks in the top 100. Not exactly the 5 picks that the Seahawks have in the top 92, but still they've got a decent number of draft picks to use. They're going to have to hit their draft again because that team looks like it's declining. Even the guys that they do have on the team, George Kittle, Trent Williams, I wouldn't put Fred Warner in that class yet, but he was banged up last year and is getting older, and he is very much a toolsy guy, and when he loses his speed, could be different. So it just feels like a declining team, and I think they're going to have to find some new, fresh players and probably some new fans because they won't show up. But all right, so that was Joey Bosa, excuse me. Another move for the Rams. The Rams re-signed, Coleman Shelton, who was a center for them before. He went to the Bears. He is back with the Rams. So that's an interesting move. Demarcus Robinson, who I thought had a pretty good year for the Rams last year, the wide receiver, he signs a 2-year deal worth $9.5 million with $6 million fully guaranteed to go across the division to the 49ers. So Demarcus Robinson, he caught the big pass, the game-winning pass against the Seahawks, against Rick Woolen. He caught a number of pretty big passes for the Rams last year. I think he had 7 touchdowns. I think that there are some legal concerns. There was something that Sean McVay said about Demarcus Robinson having some legal issues that had to be ironed out. Maybe that's why his deal was as affordable as it is. But that's the level of spend I would have been interested in the Seahawks making at the receiver position in free agency. Obviously, they didn't make that move, but the 49ers did. So that is done. DeAndre Hopkins signs a deal to play with the Baltimore Ravens. And I think there's going to be Seahawks fans that are like, hey, I would have liked to have DeAndre Hopkins at $6 million or whatever it is he's making. I think DeAndre Hopkins is at the stage in his career where he's chasing rings, and he's going to play with guys like Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. And I don't think he would have considered coming to the Seahawks, even if the Seahawks were interested. I'm not sure that he would have been the ideal person to add either. So that deal is done. A deal that hurt me a little bit, I got to admit, Roy Lopez, the nose tackle from the Cardinals, who I thought was one of the sneakier value players in this free agent class. He goes to the Detroit Lions on a 1-year, $4.65 million deal. I think that's one of the best signings of free agency. That guy is an outstanding run stuffer. I think he is a disruptor inside. I think you put him next to DJ Reader, you put him next to Aleem McNeil, you put him next to Aiden Hutchinson. I think the Lions, that was a very savvy signing and that they're gonna love. So that was a big one that I was hoping the Seahawks would make. They did not. Another defensive lineman that came off just this morning, just about 25 minutes ago. Former Husky interior lineman Greg Gaines, who was drafted by the Rams, has played for the Bucs recently. He re-signed with the Bucs for a one-year deal for $3.5 million. So that's another nose tackle kind of player, interior run stuffer. I liked, he's gone. It's not a huge loss. Greg Gaines is not a world changer, but I like Greg Gaines. I think he offers more to me than I think like a Jonathan Hankins does. I'm still wondering what the Seahawks are going to do at the nose tackle position, because as of now, I don't think they have a great option there. Byron Murphy played the nose, but it's different than really what they've asked in base downs for guys like Jonathan Hankins to do last year. So nose tackle remains an open spot and something that the Seahawks need to find. I'll look through with you all what some of the options are here in a second. Tyrell Dodson, if you're curious, he re-signs with the Dolphins. So cast aside by the Seahawks, signed by the Dolphins, had a player of the week, maybe a player of the month. I can't remember. He had defensive player award of some sort. He re-signs with the Dolphins. So they obviously liked enough what they saw to bring him back. I think maybe there's others, but I think one other move I'll mention. Fullback Reggie Gilliam of the Buffalo Bills re-signs with the Bills. This was kind of my top fullback target for the Seahawks in free agency. Didn't mean that they were going to go after him, but this is a guy that I thought showed pretty well, athletic, a little bit younger, but he returns to Buffalo, so he's off the board as a fullback target. So that's the kind of landscape that we're in. And I think that the thing that I want to get back to in a second is pretty picked over, folks. It's pretty picked over. There's not a lot left on the free agent market, and the Seahawks have a lot of money, but what are they going to do with it? I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Before I do, make sure you give the show a like, click subscribe, and let me talk about what might have been confusing to some, but is really, I think, pretty momentous. It's like a pretty big deal what happened with the compensatory picks that were announced officially by the NFL yesterday. So if you don't understand, comp picks or compensatory picks come from a secret equation that the NFL does to assess whether you lost more talent in free agency than you gained. And it's based off of contract value. And if you sign a guy of a certain contract value that matches the contract value of a free agent that you had that was on your team that you lost to another team, then it cancels out. Nothing happens. If you have a free agent, if Jaron Reed, who was a free agent for the Seahawks, if he had signed a big deal with another team and the Seahawks did not sign an external free agent to the same size contract, they would get a compensatory pick depending on the level of that contract that Jaron Reed signed. So the Seahawks lost a fair amount of talent last year to meaningful contracts. Everyone knows, and it's going to be painful to hear these names, but Damian Lewis signed a big deal. Jordan Brooks signed a big deal. They lost some guys to free agency. And so what happens is a guy named Nick, I think it's Corty or Court, he goes through and he's kind of deconstructed the NFL's equation for figuring out comp picks. And so he goes and projects what those comp picks are going to be for overthecap.com. And he's gotten good enough at it that people just kind of take it as mostly correct. And that's where all the draft boards across the NFL show his projections for what comp picks will be. And what his projections included, at least for the Seahawks, was that they would have a comp pick in I think the 4th round, the 5th round, and the 6th round. And what ended up happening is that he was right about the 4th round. He was right about the 5th round. He was wrong about the 6th round. In fact, instead of a 6th round comp pick, the Seahawks got 2 5th round comp picks. So what was projected initially to be the 212th pick of the draft, the Seahawks, ends up becoming the 175th pick to the Seahawks. That's pretty big. That's pretty big. To give you an idea, if you wanted to trade up from the 212th spot to the 175th spot in the draft, you'd have to give up a 6th round pick. Now, you might not think a 6th round pick's big, but if you've been doing these mock drafts with me, 6th round is, there's still meaningful talent to be added there. The Seahawks, added Mike Jarrell and Satawa Lamea last year in the 6th round. It's not crazy. 5th round is even better. So the fact that they're up at 175, 5th round has been a pretty significant round for the Seahawks and John Schneider over the years. That's Cam Chancellor. That's Richard Sherman. There have been others. So you definitely can find talent there. But the fact that now the Seahawks have 2 5th round picks is a pretty big deal. And the other thing that happened, and this is more minor, but because I like to obsess about these details, there were some other comp picks that maybe Nick got wrong. And so what that meant is maybe teams didn't get a comp pick that he projected. And when that happens, where you had been projected farther out, you move up a spot, right? So if, as a simple example, if you were projected to have pick 200 and then there's a comp pick that was supposed to be in front of you that doesn't happen, now you have pick 199, right? So you just move up. So the Seahawks actually had 3 other picks get affected yesterday. They had been projected to have pick 173 in the 5th round. They end up with pick 172. So they move up one. In the 6th round, they were projected to have pick 187. That moves up to 185. Now, that pick, the 185 pick, is, I think, going to be going to the Steelers in exchange for one of their 7th round picks. But for now, the Seahawks have the 185th pick in the 6th round. And then finally, the 7th round pick, one of their 7th round picks, 236, moves up 2 spots to 234. So good news for the Seahawks. I think really good news as far as the 5th round pick, comp pick, that's a really big addition. And even if the Seahawks don't use that pick to, select a player, they now have additional ammunition to move around the draft board. A 5th round pick certainly is valued more. And I think on day 2, that could come into play. You could see the Seahawks moving up from 50 or 52 into the top half of the 2nd round. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal in this draft. That could be the difference between, Tate Ratledge and Donovan Jackson, or, might even be slimmer pickings than that at 50 for offensive linemen. So, or receivers or quarterback or a number of other things. So the Seahawks are in a better position to move around the draft board than they were, 24 hours ago. So that's good news on that front. All right. So we'll go through. We might have time to do a mock draft. Not sure. We'll see. We'll see how timing goes. All right. So let's get into the meat of this. Let's get into what Brady Henderson reported at midnight today. I guess technically that would be today. Brady Henderson wrote, now that Will Fries is off the table, I don't see Seattle signing a high-priced offensive lineman, guessing they'll add another veteran at some point, but not an expensive one, in which case they'll need to find a difference maker or two in the draft, where they have 5 of the top 92 picks. So there are some people, I posted this and I said, that is not going to make a lot of Seahawks fans happy. And someone responded, well, I'm not going to take this seriously. It's just a report. folks, I'm going to, like the people, like people talk about people who know ball. If you know the Seahawks beat and you know who to pay attention to, you know it's Brady Henderson. Like, period. He's, I think, pretty much the only guy on the beat that has sources that breaks, like, he doesn't really break news. He doesn't try to do it that way. But when he kind of guesses about what the Seahawks are going to do, that's kind of the tone he takes. Generally, that's sourced information. And so I think when Brady says this, we should pay attention. And I also think it makes some sense. I mean, I'm going to be totally honest with you. I think it makes some sense. What I talked to you about yesterday was, of the guys that are left for the Seahawks to consider on the offensive line, there's really 3 names I think make sense. And let me go ahead and find, I will share this with you so you can see it as I'm going through it. All right. Let's do, sure, we'll do that. Let's see. Okay, so let me get this up on stage, and I will put it in a way that you guys can see it. And we'll zoom in here and get this guy up there. All right. So there are 3 guys I think would be an upgrade at guard on the offensive line that they could sign. Tevin Jenkins, again, 27 years old, a good player, not a great player, often injured, and the fact that has like some decent tape and people think of him as a decent player, but there hasn't been any real action on him, I think speaks volumes about kind of where there's some questions about him around the league. Mekhi Becton, who is the fan favorite, 6'7", 363. Everybody would love to see him, just be an imposing figure on the Seahawks line. He's going to cost probably a lot of money. And even if he doesn't, I don't know that, like I've said, I'm not sure that he's a real fit for what they want to do in this outside zone. Like, I don't think 363, I don't think he's this big mover at that size. So he also is not a good pass protector. Like, even though last year he had a year where a lot of people loved watching him at guard, he's challenged as a pass protector. So I don't think he's going to be an option. And then finally, the guy that I think is maybe one of one, maybe there's only really truly one option on this list that is semi-realistic, it's Kevin Zeitler. And he's 35 years old. He played fantastic football for the Lions last year. It seems likely he will re-sign with the Lions, but maybe not. And who knows if he's willing and interested to, he's at the end of his career. He's certainly, I would guess he's going to be chasing rings as well. So is he going to want to come to Seattle? I mean, they could pay him a lot of money, but are they going to do that? I don't know. So those are the 3 names. And based on Brady Henderson's report, I think we probably can cross off all 3 of those names. They're probably not the guys that are coming to Seattle. And then you get into some picked over, leftover kind of names. Brandon Scherf, 33 years old, super steep decline on his play, former top 5 overall pick, but one of the worst zone blocking guards in football last year. Don't know that makes a lot of sense, but maybe. Shaq Mason, I think, has the highest ceiling of the guys that we're going to talk about from there. Shaq Mason is, 2 or 3 years removed from being one of the best guards in the NFL. The last 2 or 3 years, though, he's not been one of the best guards in the NFL. He is 32 years old. He was cut or released by the Texans, and the Texans are signing Laken Tomlinson to replace him. So consider that. Consider that the Texans believe that Laken Tomlinson is an upgrade over Shaq Mason. Buyer beware. Dalton Risner, 29 years old. He had an okay year with the Vikings. He is a decent outside zone guy. Could be a possibility. Um, Will Hernandez, 29 years old. I really like the player. I'm not sure how good of a fit he is for what they're doing, and he's coming off a serious knee injury. So they may need to see a little bit more about his medicals before they'd sign him. Don't know with him if he's an option. I will say if you get Will Hernandez and he's healthy, I'd be pretty happy. If we're talking about leftovers, like Will Hernandez is a pretty solid player. I think he's definitely a more solid guard than Laken Tomlinson, especially in pass protection. And he's a rugged guy and he's a vet. I just like his demeanor in general. I think he'd be a good fit. I just don't know the scheme fit as much, and I definitely don't know where he is medically. The other name I had on here from yesterday was Cesar Ruiz, who is currently on the Saints. He is not available. He's not a free agent. That's why I've got him color coded differently. You'd have to trade for him. He played with John Benton and with Clint Kubiak last year. He's not been a very good player, but made a pretty big leap in his first year with Clint Kubiak and John Benton. So maybe he's an option. But this is the state of things, guys. There's not a lot else out there to go and, add as a for the Seahawks. So what this leaves them with is a couple of things. It leaves them with cap space. They've got a lot of cap space that they could spend. And we'll talk about if there's anybody worth spending it on. And then it probably leaves them really going heavier into this draft class after offensive linemen. And if you watched any of the mock drafts I did yesterday, it's not the worst thing. There are some pretty good offensive linemen in this draft, but counting on rookies to come in and play well on the offensive line is usually not a good bet. Let me tell you really quickly. I'm going to do this. We're going to look at rookies last year. How many of them had a grade? How many of them played like meaningful snaps? Like, let's say at least 300 snaps. At least 300 snaps. How many of them of rookie guards last year played 300 snaps and had a PFF grade over 60? Okay, over 60. 2. Dominic Pooney had an 80.5 grade, and Jackson Powers Johnson for the Raiders had a 63.9 grade. Nobody else was over 60. Again, 60 is league average. That is 19 guards that were drafted last year and got at least one snap. Okay, so that's not great. I mean, if you're wondering, Christian Haynes was 48.5. Satawa Lamea had the worst grade of any of them at 36.9. His pass block grade was 17.8. So not great, at least in that regard. You can go back the previous year, 2023. And those guys that were drafted in 2023, how many of them in their first year, played meaningful snaps and had grades over 60? 3. Sidy Sow for New England had a 64.4 grade. Pete Skoronski had a 61.6 grade, and Steve Avila for the Rams had a 61.1. It's just not common. It is not common for rookies to come in and be good. It's just not common. So that is the reality. Now, they could be better over time. The fact of the matter is, someone was like, stop selling Christian Haynes, revival. This is crazy. Guys, Christian Haynes Christian Haynes was a rookie last year. I'm just telling you, like there's a big difference. There's a big difference between your rookie year and later years. So I do think that you can't just decide you you can't just decide a player's fate after their rookie season. And you definitely can't decide their fate after a season where the offensive line coach and the play caller get fired and had never been in the NFL before and had a real problem coming up with a run game. So I don't think it's crazy to think those guys are going to take a step forward, but this is the precarious path. This is going to be a challenge. And I wouldn't want to be John Schneider, man. He is going to have to answer questions like, and Mike McDonald, frankly, like, you guys said this was a priority. What have you done to make it better? Like, are you really going to try to sell us on Shaq Mason? Are you really going to try to sell us on, Dalton Risner as the big step forward? That's going to be rough. And I think they know it's going to be rough. And I think that the coaching staff's just going to have to, they're going to have to do their best work. They're going to have to do their best work. It's not a great situation in that regard. So, like I said, I think it seems likely they'll get a vet of some sort in free agency. They will. But remember, they didn't sign Laken Tomlinson until April 15th last year for $1.25 million. They might not sign anybody this week. They might not sign anybody next week. We'll see. It's possible they'll look into trades, but I just don't think there are a lot. I mean, Cesar Ruiz is probably the guy that I think the best would make some sense. I just don't see that happening. I'd love them to trade for Eric McCoy, the center from New Orleans. I definitely don't see that happening, but they're going to keep looking. They'll turn over every rock and try to find something. So if they have this cap space and they're not going to spend it on offensive linemen, then who are they going to spend it on? And I think this is a question I don't have a great answer to be very clear. We can go through this list of free agents and, even guys that I thought maybe like in some chance they might go after, like Khalil Mack, veteran, but a pass rusher. Maybe they'd go after him. I think one option is Trey Hendrickson. They now have some extra draft capital. Trey Hendrickson is 30 years old. He is due for a big deal. They reportedly offered Geno Smith and DK Metcalf for Max Crosby, who's an edge player. Would they offer a third-round pick for Trey Hendrickson? I don't know. Maybe. I think it's more possible than it was a day ago. That's one option. Trey Hendrickson could be an option. Another option, DeMarcus Lawrence. He is older. He's like 33. But as I said before free agency, Ad Dirty recruited Jonathan Hankins up here after being their coach in Dallas, the defensive line coach. Does he go back and recruit DeMarcus Lawrence as an edge player? And one of the things there that might be interesting, if they do that, do they keep Uchenna Nwosu? Which would be crazy if they let Nwosu go and get even more cap space. But DeMarcus Lawrence is still an elite edge setter in the run, physical player. I don't think it makes a ton of sense, but that's a player that would probably cost a little bit of money. I'm looking through these names. There's just not a lot of other names that make sense, guys. Asante Samuel Jr., did he sign anywhere? I don't think he did. The cornerback, maybe they go after a corner. Receiver. certainly would make some sense. That would be someone like Cooper Kupp, maybe Stephon Diggs. I'm not even sure Keenan Allen qualifies as a wide receiver anymore. He's almost up to like tight end weight. Safety was a position I thought maybe they look at Justin Reed or something like that, but I don't think so. It is really slim pickings, guys. It is very slim pickings. Dennis Gardeck is a guy I still do like. I think he is a good rotational edge rusher and makes some plays. Elijah Molden, the safety, maybe. And some of these guys might have actually already signed, by the way. I can't be sure that all these guys are available, but I think I have a pretty good idea. Yeah, it's. I mean, even guys like Darrell Taylor have been signed. Not that they were going to bring him back, but Evan Brown, who I liked as an option, he re-signed with the Cardinals. And if you look at, I don't know if Diami Brown signed yet. Elijah Moore, we talked about. Oh, he did. Diami Brown signed with the Jaguars, so he's gone. Kevin Givens, decent interior player last year for the 49ers. But, like, these are just like, these guys offer anything at all? I'm going to look here just specifically at interior defensive line for a second. And, I mean, Calais Campbell would be fun. I certainly would love to see Calais Campbell in a Seahawks uniform. Even if he's 75 years old, he's still an elite run defender. That might be the most fun signing they could make at this point. But it's looking like they're going to go into the draft with a need at nose tackle, a need at guard. Maybe they want to add to center, wide receiver. I think you could make a tight end case, backup linebacker. It's a fair number of needs for this team still. So it's rough. We've already got a bunch of super chats. Let me get to these, and then I want to talk to you all about the rumors going on around ownership. All right, we'll talk about that when I come back after doing these super chats. So we've got first super chat, Ben Kaspersian. Hopefully I'm coming close on that name. Griff said that John Schneider is sandbagging the coaches. I think John is really putting all the pressure on the staff. Maybe not intentionally. Feels like if they do well, it'll be in spite of John Schneider. Thoughts? John Schneider's not sandbagging the coaches. I love Griff. I know what he's saying. He's not sandbagging the coaches. Like I've said before, and they've said clearly, they wanted Geno Smith back and they wanted DK Metcalf back. That was the plan. It didn't work. Like, those guys didn't want to be here. I don't think that that's John Schneider sandbagging. That's the reality. And so then they pivot. And I think that Sam Darnold was the next best option to Geno Smith, for sure. And I think they got him on a screaming deal, a really good deal. They got Jaron Reed back on a screaming deal. They got Ernest Jones back on a screaming deal. That's not sandbagging. Like, those are good additions given the situation. And by all accounts, they were in on Will Fries. And the other thing I want to say about the Will Fries deal, I tweeted this out this morning as well. Let me pull up the numbers so we can be specific on this. All right. So Will Fries signed a 5-year deal. Of the literally hundreds of deals that have been signed so far. Well, this is by Spotrac, which, by the way, generally avoid Spotrac. The guys at Over the Cap do the real work, and the guy at Spotrac steals their work. So Not a huge Spotrac fan, but in any event, this tweet says that there are 51 one-year deals, 88 two-year deals. This must be all contracts in the NFL, maybe, but I'm not sure. In any event, this is the signing so far: 51 one-year deals, 88 two-year deals, 114 three-year deals, 6 four-year deals. And how many 5-year deals? One 5-year deal. 5-year deal for Will Fries. And so you could talk about like, oh, is John Schneider sandbagging? 31 other GMs, like not even 31 in this case. Let's say we know the Giants were in on it. We know the Patriots were in on it. We know there's a number of other teams that wanted Will Fries. They had cap space too. Tons in the case of the Patriots, have way more than the Seahawks. Only the Vikings were willing to go to 5 years. And I don't know from a team perspective exactly why you'd be reluctant to go out farther, because generally all these deals you can get out of pretty quickly. But I just want to call out how rare that is. It is the only deal that's a 5-year deal. And that's the thing we're talking about, is Will Fries. And we also, excuse me, let me clear my throat on mute before I keep talking here. We're also not done. We don't know what they're going to get. Now, I'm taking Brady Henderson's report as being probably accurate, but we don't know what they're going to do yet. There might be more moves to make. So it's not like there was a huge list of guys to go get. Drew Dahlman, by all reports, wanted to go to Chicago and took less money to go there. Is that a John Schneider problem? James Daniels, that's one that I like. Who knows if they like him? He's coming off a more serious injury, an Achilles injury, versus a tibia injury for Will Fries. He goes to the Dolphins on what I think is a great deal. If he works out, one of the best signings of free agency. If he doesn't, not great. So I still would have made that deal. You can criticize John for that. Sure. Like that to me I think that's one that is a viable criticism. We might see Nick Herbig, the guy that, yesterday I was talking about, has had some good moments as a guard, but it just hasn't played that much. Also a Pittsburgh Steeler free agent who's a guard, played some center as well. But in any event, I don't think that he's sandbagging. I think that the market for quality additions on the interior offensive line sucks. And I think they shot their shot at one of the guys and they didn't get it. And I think it's totally fair to be critical of that for that. In an isolation, yeah, I would be happier right now if the Seahawks had a 5-year, $88 million deal for Will Fries than not. But that's one move. And there are things about that move that I think it's fair to say that we don't all understand about what the implications are of an $88 million deal or a 5-year deal or all those other things that maybe we just don't understand. So I don't think that. I do, as I said before, I do think that the difficulty level for the coaching staff has been raised. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. But I don't know that I say that that's Schneider intentionally doing that. That seems way off to me. One more comment on that. Why would John Schneider want to make it harder for the coaches? Of course he doesn't want to do that. He's going to get fired if they do poorly either way. So anyway, I just think that that's a fan frustration reaction. That's not, I think, based in reality. Andrew Scanlon says, he doesn't say anything. He just said becomes a member of the channel. Welcome to the group. Welcome to the family, Andrew. Thanks for joining. I love that. Noah Berman, who's been a member for a while, says, good morning, Brian. Good morning to you, Noah. Says, I said Monday that John Schneider had a needle to thread. His team better be able to identify top O-line talent this draft or it's over. Hope Mike McDonald stays. Yeah, I mean, I talked about it as a high wire act, and once once they traded Geno Smith and DK Metcalf, there was no net. Like, this could end up being really, really bad. They could be a terrible football team this year. That is a possibility. And I thought the move that he made with Sam Darnold was a really positive step forward. I thought the deal with Ernest Jones was a positive step forward. Jaron Reed, positive step forward. And then they tumbled on the Will Fries deal. And that may be enough that they don't recover. That is a viable possibility. But now that coaching staff has to do their best work, and they have to really, really nail some players. So that's the deal. Noah Berman with another super chat says, also, I have to wonder if the lack of spending massive cap next season means a sale is coming. Few liabilities make it a more attractive asset. I'm going to talk about the ownership thing after I'm done with these super chats. So if there's more on that, I'll probably just talk about it in the end. I'll just say, like, I don't buy that, honestly. Like, maybe coaches or GMs contracts would matter. An owner would want to have some more say in that. But you're talking about a deal, like if the Seahawks sold, it would be like $6-7 billion. You think they're going to care about $12 million or $50 million like for a deal? Like, I just don't buy it. I don't buy it. I think this is stirred up by fans who are frustrated and are looking to point fingers. And I'm not saying this is you, Noah, but this is my perspective. If the team's going to be sold, it's going to be sold. Or when this team is sold, it's going to get sold. And whatever contracts are in place are going to be in place. And I don't think the team is going to be actively, unless it was an imminent deal, I don't think that's going to affect these types of signings. If you're talking about signing a franchise quarterback, which you just did, a 3-year, $100 million deal, and you think that they're not going to sign someone for less money because they're worried about if impact on a purchase, like, nah, doesn't compute. So, they signed Leonard Williams to a $21.5 million deal last year. I think they're going to extend Charles. Like, none of this makes sense. I'm completely calling bullshit on this. All right. Super Sauce XL. Thanks for the great coverage, Brian. Any thoughts on what the Seahawks are going to do with all this cap space? Well, appreciate the super chat. We just talked about that. I don't know. Like, Trey Hendrickson is one idea. Maybe there's another sign and trade kind of thing, or trade and sign in this case kind of thing that would come about. I'm going to have to start scouring the rosters to see if there's anybody that might make sense in that regard, but don't know. I do not know. It might roll over. It's they might save it for in-season trades. Maybe they will do some. I mean, one idea would be that they do some of these extensions for their 2022 draft class for Charles Cross and Abe Lucas and Kobe Bryant and Tariq Woolen and, on and on. Maybe they do some front-loaded contracts to where the cap hit takes up most of this year and then gets more friendly in future years. I don't know. But there's not a lot of guys that anybody should be like, go get this guy in free agency. There's not a lot of guys like that left. I don't know if there's any guys like that left. All right, Matt McManus, he's gifted 10 Hawk Blogger memberships. Matt, thank you so much, man. Appreciate you. And if you get one of these memberships, consider giving one, or even better, upgrade to a club level to get access to some of the members-only videos and content. I'm also thinking about doing something. I haven't figured out for sure if I can manage this yet, but for the suite level members, I might create a separate chat, like a Discord or something that's just for suite level folks. Be a pretty small crew and could grow over time, but might make a pretty exclusive chat. We also have a chat that's over on Slack for Patreon members. So patreon.com/hawkblogger. All of these shows, I put the audio versions on Patreon. You can get them there. They're ad-free. They're going to stay ad-free on Patreon. I will tell you, I'm pretty sure I'm going to start making this podcast available for everybody on audio for free once I hit 365 straight days. And I'll probably at some point start putting ads in the free version of this pod. The Patreon version will always be ad free, but patreon.com/hawkblogger is another place to go to support the show. Quimbus says, not sure if this has been asked, but is ownership to blame? For example, did Jody and her office say no to the 5-year limited? Okay, I will talk about this immediately following getting through these super chats. So good question. I will get to your answer. Tyler Sells, combine 18 and 52 to jump up the board for Membu. So this is talking about trading your 18th pick in the draft and the second round pick 52 that you got from the Steelers to jump up and get Armand Membu, who would be a fantastic, like, talk about a guy that I believe would be a terrific guard day one. It would be him. I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think he's a great target. I'm just not sure. Like, maybe if there's a few picks that they have to jump, maybe. But second round, that's a high price to pay. So I think it's unlikely. Good question, though. Jeff Jennings gifted 5 Hawkblogger memberships. That's another 5 free memberships floating out there. All you got to do to get one of these, have gifting turned on your YouTube account. If you don't know how to do that, Google it. And then after you've turned gifting on, like the show, subscribe to the channel, and just watch it. If you do that, you're going to get one of these gifted memberships because YouTube determines who gets these based off of how much you engage with the content here. All right. Corey Coleman says, how would you feel about a Donovan Jackson, Jared Wilson, and Kevin Zeitler as your starting interior offensive line? I would love that. I would love that. I don't know if I believe Zeitler is going to happen, but to me, that's the best possible outcome right now. If that happens, that's the best possible option because I do believe he would immediately raise the level of your offensive line and he would be a veteran in that room. I'd love that. It seems like a pipe dream, to be honest. I think the Donovan Jackson, Jared Wilson thing could happen. I do. We'll talk about that some more as we do more mock drafts and such. All right. Colin Lundstrom has been a member for 10 months. Colin's the best. Love him. Says Brian is the GOAT of all day live streams now. Well, thank you, man. We had another 25,000 people watch yesterday. We had 35,000 day one. It was unbelievable, the support. And even with me yesterday, leaving for an hour at a time, people would hang out. 10,000 people would hang out here, just talking and chat and whatever. So very cool. And we'll find more opportunities to do that. But, I'm not going to sit on here all day just filling air. I don't think anybody would find that particularly useful, but we'll find opportunities to commingle together and keep this community growing. Six Riley says, what are your thoughts on Iowa's Connor Colby? He had some pretty, his athletic testing was not great. So he also did not meet with the Seahawks at the combine. I think he still had some pretty good, at least grades as a zone blocker, as a guard in college. But I think I'm a little bit less in on Connor Colby than I was going into the combine. Hawk City says, why do you think Tevin Jenkins is still available? Seems like a logical fit for the Hawks and is a good zone blocker. Also, go get Hendrickson. I think people probably attached to that idea. At least that would be something. He led the league in sacks last year. Wouldn't be hard to get excited about that. Although, to be very honest, I think it's a silly thing to do. I think they're better off using the draft picks to get young players. And I think that Trey Hendrickson, trading for a 30-year-old edge rusher and paying a 30-year-old edge rusher is just bad business. It just is. It's bad process, and you're almost certainly going to regret that move. There's not a lot of 33-year-old pass rushers or 32-year-old pass rushers that still on the edge are what they used to be. So as far as Tevin Jenkins, I think injuries. I'll say this, and this is without knowing Tevin Jenkins at all. This is without having any information, but this is just something I've observed and I've listened to from NFL folks. How you deal with injuries says a lot about you as a player. And there are some injuries where you tear a ligament or you break a bone or whatever, and people don't expect you to play through it. But there's others that you could play through, and a lot of players do. I mean, famously, Ronnie Lott had a finger removed and to keep playing. Um, I think there might. I'm guessing, completely guessing. I'm guessing there might be some toughness questions there, and whether or not he's a guy that will play through some of the nicks and scratches you get being an NFL offensive lineman. I don't know. I don't know. I have enough information, but that's my best guess about why he's still available. Vio Faze becomes a member. Well, welcome as a member, Vio. Good to have you as a member. Joey Walker. With a surplus in cap space, can John Schneider restructure deals to make them front cap heavy instead of backload? Would help us down the line. Yeah, Joey, that's kind of what I was just talking about. Is that's a possibility. I don't know that I've seen that happen very often. I think more often you'd see teams roll cap space forward, but we'll find out. It might be something I end up asking them about later on. I'll be at the owners meeting at the end of the month. I think John Schneider's there, but I'm not sure. I know that Mike McDonald will be there, and Burt Cold and Jody Allen will be there. Divine Comedy says, John, quote, he's the quarterback till he's not. Cost the team. Why would a GM be this dumb about his starting quarterback? And for what? To woo Drew Lock? Malpractice. I don't know if I fully understand the point getting made here. I think what Divine Comedy is trying to say is John Schneider chased Geno Smith away by talking up Drew Lock last year and saying things like he's our QB till he's not. Maybe it's possible. I thought it was I was pretty critical of John last year for how much they were talking about Drew Lock and how little they were talking about Geno Smith. And it did ruffle some feathers. And then they didn't extend him. So yeah, there's some aspect of this where I'm not sure John Schneider was ever as enamored with Geno Smith as Pete Carroll or even Mike McDonald. I think that's potentially accurate. I also think it's real that your general manager, part of his job is to look past the current and be keeping a time horizon in mind. As I wrote a few days ago, the GM's job is to find players that are better than the guys that are already on the roster. So getting attached to guys that are already on the roster is kind of antithetical to their responsibility. And once guys get north of 30 at any position, they're definitely going to start having the GMs thinking about how do you get the next guy. And when you get to 35, they're definitely going to do it. And then when it's the most important position on the field, they're definitely going to do it. So do I think Geno Smith has 2 to 3 years left of playing really good football? I do. I think Mike McDonald probably believed that as well. I'm not sure John Schneider was as convinced, and I think John Schneider used this as an opportunity to get younger and bring in, I think they're almost certainly going to bring in a rookie QB as well. And I don't think that's the worst process. I really don't. As much as I love Geno Smith and I'm going to be rooting for him, I'm just not convinced. Sorry, I've got something in my eye. I'm sure this is fun to watch. I think that the fans should mostly be applauding that John Schneider is willing to take the risk on his own job in order to put the franchise in potentially a better position to get their next quarterback. And I think this is the right process, but I understand the frustration. VFA says, John Schneider came out saying he doesn't value offensive line. No, he did not. He actually explicitly said the opposite of that. He said he does value the offensive line. He said that he has worked for GMs who did not value the offensive line. He used to say a guard is a guard is a guard. That's not his perspective. He does value it, but he's made some decisions where he said, you know what? I think Leonard Williams is a better player than Damian Lewis, and I'm going to pay Leonard Williams, and I'm going to let Damian Lewis go. I think that's the kind of thing that fans don't want to face, that GMs do have to face. And so this is false. It's just not true. That's not what he said. He's never said that. His actions have implied it. So I'll give you that much. I will give you that much. All right. Jason Sorensen says, wait, you guys think Sam is a franchise QB? Well, I mean, define franchise quarterback. Is he the guy that is your de facto starter? Is he a guy that would start for a lot of teams in the NFL? Yeah. Is he one of the best quarterbacks in football? No, he's not. Was he one of the best quarterbacks in football last year? Yeah, he was. So when I say franchise QB, I'm saying when you sign someone to a $100 million deal, that's a 3-year deal. That's not signing somebody to be your backup. And as you can see, as you look around, Daniel Jones signing for $19 million, or some of these other guys, Zach Wilson, whatever, signing for $15 million, whatever these guys are signing for. Those are very different contracts than a 3-year, $100 million deal. So that's what I mean. I'm not going to go into great detail about what is and isn't a franchise quarterback, but my point that I was making before was, if there's something about a sale with ownership that is causing them to hesitate on contracts, I don't think a 3-year, $100 million deal is going to go by without being noticed. And they already did it. So I just don't think that it's more evidence that they're not worried about that. All right. She'd said, why, Trey Brown? Why? Yeah, so it sucks that Trey's going to the 49ers, but I wish him well. I wish the 49ers nothing but misery, but I wish him well. And then just a quick, I think maybe super thanks or something from In the Air. Appreciate that. All right, so I've teased it for a while. Let me get to it. And there's questions about this report that's been circulated. Started by Dan Veens. I think Corbin Smith is kind of fed into it a little bit. I haven't paid super close attention to that. What I'll say, yesterday I said, just be careful about reports like this. I'm going to say this. I don't think it's true. Like, I strongly believe it is not true. And I'm not going to go into all the details about why I believe that, but that's my belief. And I wouldn't say that if I didn't have some confidence that what I'm saying is accurate. And I think it's really unfortunate that these kinds of things take root. And it's not surprising that they take root at a time when, people are upset. I'm upset. I wanted them to get more offensive line help. I've been talking about it. I do this show every single day. I've been talking about it for longer than that. But when you kind of throw like a match into like a dry pile of tinder, like a tumbleweed, it's going to catch fire. And right now, people are so frustrated about what's gone on with the Seahawks not signing offensive linemen that first the frustration comes out of John Schneider, who is very unpopular with Seahawks fans right now. And then this idea of, it could be ownership keeping them from spending the money. It's not. Ownership's not the problem. And I'm not even sure John Schneider is the problem. I think the market's the problem. So I'm not saying that Dan or Corbin or whoever else is reporting this is lying. I'm not saying that the person or people that told them this are lying. They could have misinformation. They could have misunderstood something. There's all sorts of reasons that Dan, I've met Dan before. He's a good guy. Like I said, former broadcaster. I think, does a good job on his show. There's nothing like, I'm not here to disparage Dan, but I strongly believe what he's saying is not true. And I think starting to turn arrows towards Jody Allen is not a good look for someone who I think has done a pretty good job in stepping forward once her brother died, and has, like, for example, the decision to let Pete Carroll go. A lot of people, we all love Pete Carroll, but an owner or ownership group that doesn't care about the state of the team or is not invested in the team would not have let Pete Carroll go while he still had a lot of money left on his deal, because owners don't want to pay coaches to not coach for their team. And it would have been easy for them to just ride this out. It would have been easy for them to make the sale already. And I think that they've chosen not to do that. There's a lot of money to be made by doing that. And so my advice, take it or leave it. Don't point the arrows there. I don't think that's constructive. I don't think it's useful. And I don't think it's based on any accuracy. I would also point out, as I said yesterday, just as more evidence, if you don't want to take my word for it, which you don't have to, the likelihood that Dan and Corbin, or if it's just Dan, I don't know. I don't want to, I honestly have not seen what Corbin's been reporting, so I'm not sure. But if it's just Dan, the likelihood that Dan has a scoop that no one on the Seahawks beat has, not Brady Henderson, not Bob Condata, not Mike Dugar, that nobody nationally has, Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, Tom Pelissaro, like, that nobody else has this scoop, as juicy as that is, that ownership is the issue, or that there's been any rumblings about this at any level on any story. Just use your common sense a little bit. Like, what's the likelihood that that's the case? And, I don't want to say a bunch more than that. I just wanted to make sure that for folks tuning in, that you hear it from me, my perspective on this, whatever that's worth to you. But I'm not going to let that just go out there unchecked as if it's factual. I'm not going to get into like a Twitter war about it. I'm not going to go back and forth on it. You know where my position is on this now. And if you followed the show for a long time, you know that I don't do this very often. I specifically, for a very long time, I've made the decision, I'm not going to try to break news. I'm not going to talk to you about, I've got these sources and they've told me this. There's a lot of things that I've been privy to. I just don't share, because I wouldn't be privy to those things. I wouldn't have the trust of those people if I shared those things. So I don't do that. And in this case, I just am sharing my own perspective that I think is based on solid info that this is not the case. So that's it on that topic. I see that some more super chats came in when I was on my little rant here. Mark Hausman says, thank you for doing this, Brian. Even though free agency has been a bust, you have made it enjoyable. Man, well, thanks, dude. That's a nice thing to say. I really, really appreciate it. And thanks for being you're not a member, but you should consider being a member, Mark. Bill Anderson says, don't understand all the hate for John Schneider. He tried for the O-line and missed. It's still early. Don't sweat it. Go Hawks. I will say this, Bill, I think that's a great perspective. I do understand it. Yes, he swung and missed on this one offensive lineman, but it's been a decade of not going after the right guys, not nailing them, not spending. It's aggravating. I think everybody has 100% good reason to be pissed that the Seahawks again did not land a quality offensive lineman in free agency. I think that's absolutely reasonable for people to feel that way. I just think this notion that he sandbagged is off. I think that the other thing that I will say on this topic, what have we all talked about? Well, John Schneider won't spend. He won't spend. He won't go after the interior. They were in on one of the most expensive interior offensive linemen in this free agent class. Like, they were in. So what does that tell you? They were willing to spend on interior offensive linemen, just not this one. So what I go back to is, why did you leave it to only one guy? Like, why was it only one guy? Because the move that I will forever not understand until John tells me why on earth would you not send a 2026 fourth round pick for Joe Thuney? Why? Like, beat it. Send a third round pick. Send a 2025 fourth round pick. Whatever. Beat that deal and sign Joe Thuney at 32 to a contract. I don't care. That move is bizarre to me. Like, that stands out massively in this landscape. Joe Thuney is still one of the best guards in the NFL. He's 32. He's not 35 like Kevin Zeitler. He's 32. He played left tackle for them this year a lot. He's so good he could play left tackle. Now, he had a rough Super Bowl, fine. Like, he's not perfect, but God, do you know how much better Joe Thuney is than Laken Tomlinson? Like, it's not even close. So that's the one for me I'm most critical about. I'm not going to absolutely nail them about not doing a 5-year, $88 million deal, 5-year, $88 million deal for Will Fries, who, has never had a full season where he was a solid player. I'm not going to kill them about that. I think it would have been better for them to do it, but they didn't do it. The Joe Thuney deal, I will never fully understand that. Like, that one blows me away. I mean, the Jonah Jackson move, 6th round pick, the Rams may not have been willing to trade within division, and that's a terrible contract that he's on. I personally like Jonah Jackson, but he might not. Also, he's a pretty big dude. He's a lumbering guy. I'm not sure he's a great outside zone fit. But Joe Thuney, my God. Thuney's just a guy you had to get. Like, that's the one for me that really drives me crazy. So, I get why people are upset. I also think that there's a path here, but it's a really risky one. So this is kind of the state of things, guys. Again, recapping for you, Seahawks miss out on Will Fries, their top free agent guard target. They, according to Brady Henderson, are not going to be in on the rest of any expensive veteran options. That probably removes Mekhi Becton, maybe Tevin Jenkins, probably Kevin Zeitler from the list. Probably. There's not a lot of other options out there. We'll look and pay attention to what happens there. The league year officially opens at 1 o'clock Pacific time today. That's when the trades will become final. We will find out for sure what the final part of the DK Metcalf trade is. We're assuming the Seahawks 6th round pick goes to the Steelers for the Steelers higher 7th round pick, but we'll find out for sure, I think, today. All the moves will become official. The DK Metcalf trade, the Geno Smith trade, the signing of Sam Darnold, all those things become official. Cooper Kupp will be officially released today. Shaq Mason will be officially released. So that will happen most likely. And then maybe Cooper Kupp is an option here in Seattle. Don't know. So there's going to be more news. I think most of it will be news we already know, but we'll keep an eye on it. If anything interesting, meaningful happens, I'll come on, do an emergency pod for that. Otherwise, we will do a Real Hawk Talk tonight. It will be Evan Hill and Dana O'Gorman with us. Don't know the exact time yet, so make sure you click subscribe, click like, and click that bell to get notified when we go live so you always know. Anytime there's new news, I will be here and I'll share it with you. All right, with that, I'm going to say, we got a couple super chats that I want to miss. Appreciate people doing that. Scott Broughton has given away 5 more Hawk Blogger memberships. That's awesome. Thank you, Scott, for being a member and doing that. Thomas Ish says, Joe Milton is apparently in trade talks. Do we take a chance on him for a late round pick? I still would. I mean, I would. Why not? But I think most likely the Seahawks have some guys they like in this draft class better than Joe Milton. I'm going to be out there alone. The things I saw Joe Milton do in that game, I don't care who it was against. There's tools there to work with that are really appealing. Arm-wise, physical-wise, creativity-wise, off-structure, off-script, being able to break tackles. Like, I think there's something there that I would want to take a shot on. But a lot of people say Joe Milton is nothing, and you get really bad looks if you say good things about Joe Milton. People think you're crazy. So be careful about joining me out on that limb. All right. KJH, says, who's been a member for 4 months, was it coaching? Posick and Glowinski weren't bad. Yeah, so I think the point here is that there were some Seahawks players that moved on that had decent careers. Glowinski had a decent career. It wasn't like great. Ethan Posick had a decent final year with the Seahawks and has been decent with the Browns. He also is not great. So I think primarily it's been skill and identifying the talent. But the other thing that I've been really critical of John about for 8 years is I think that he and Tom Cable talked about how offensive line is just drying up, that nobody plays the position the right way. They're all in these spread offenses. They talked about it years and years and years ago. And I was like, you know what? That's exactly right. It's a good insight. So what's the logical conclusion? Veteran offensive linemen should be valued more highly in the NFL because they've already been proven out. They've already developed now in the NFL, and you know what you're getting. So there was a chance 7 years ago to actually go into the free agent market and get decent deals on interior offensive linemen and offensive linemen in general, because the rest of the league hadn't totally caught up to the fact that there weren't any good ones coming out of the college anymore. They didn't do that. They would get like the Luke Jokels and the Jamarcus Webbs and like these just crap, cheap veterans. And that was the wrong strategy. It was the wrong process. So I think John absolutely blew it back then. I think he's now come around that he might have to pay, but it's pretty late, and it might be too late for him ultimately. There is just news that came out from the NFL about performance-based pay distributions for 2024. So the top 25 of these, I'm going to see if there's any Seahawks on this list. Tariq Woolen is on this list. He was given $841,976 for his performance this year as a 5th-round pick. The top player in terms of performance-based pay adjustments or distributions was Jamian Sherwood, who was a 5th-round pick in 2021. He got $1,092,206. Interesting, Mike Jackson, who was traded by the Seahawks to Carolina, was a 5th-round pick in 2019. He got the 3rd most. He got $1,035,260. So that was a player the Seahawks moved on from. Ended up getting Josh Jobe eventually. Of the 2024 draft class, interestingly, a couple players got performance-based pay. Dominic Pooney got $898,036. That was 11th on the list. He was a 3rd-round pick. Not as painful as Creed Humphrey, but still pretty painful. I really wanted Dominic Pooney. That's not... If you listened to the show, you can go back and find that's true and not revisionist. All right. Kalen Bullock, the safety from USC, was the third round pick for Houston. He got $855,000. And then the only other draft pick from last year, Mason McCormick, who was another guy I liked, drafted by the Steelers in the fourth round. He got $819,000. So performance-based pay distributions, that's, I think, basically when guys outperform their level. So just, I can read this really quickly in case you're really curious. A fund is created and used as a supplemental form of player compensation based upon a comparison of playing time to salary. Players become eligible to receive a bonus distribution in any regular season in which they play at least one official down. In general, players with higher playtime percentages and lower salaries benefit the most from performance-based pay. Say that 5 times fast. All right. There's another super chat. Let me get this from Michael Hendrickson. Von Miller was a game changer at age 32. Trey Hendrickson has some juice left, and he has a good last name. I love that from you, Michael. We'll see. We will see. All right, everybody. I'm going to leave you there. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll also be back tonight with Real Hawk Talk. Until then, have a great rest of your Wednesday. Appreciate all of you. Make sure you give the show a like and click subscribe. I'm Brian Nemhauser. This has been episode, I want to say, 352 of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Take care, y'all.